Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I'm Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Hoare. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, it's time for our favorite kind of show, the one where the listeners do all the show prep for us.
I love it. It's our first listener questions of the Tennessee playoff era for the upcoming first-round game in Ohio Stadium. And again, we're trying to cover this from as many angles as possible. We can't always think of all of the angles. We choose not to think of all of the angles, and so we leave it up to the fine listeners and viewers to do that. So, Tom, without any further ado, let's go.
Let's go. First one from Drew Crabtree 12. Confidence level of the Ohio State offensive line versus the Tennessee defensive line on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the most confident.
You know, we could almost go up and down the line. 1 to 10 with Donovan Jackson, 1 to 10 with Carson Hinsman, 1 to 10 with, whoever. Overall, I'm probably like thinking 5 or a 6, just because I don't know how confident you can be in the offensive line right now, because again, you can't lose your top 2 guys, and you don't end up paying for it in some way. So I would probably say 5 or 6, and that may be, I don't know, does that feel a little generous? Does that feel a little high? Because there could be times where, again, if you can't run the ball, say you run for 90 yards on 35 carries, then can you really be all that confident in this offensive line? But Tennessee's defensive line and defense has been very good against run. I think if the pass blocking is there, which is maybe where your 2 best offensive linemen are right now in terms of the outside pass blocking, then maybe you can stretch that 4 to a confidence level of 6. So I would probably say somewhere in the 5 to 6 range. Tom, where are you?
5 feels about right. This is a matchup that is probably going to be really, really important in determining who wins the game. And it's the strongest area of Tennessee's defense, I think. We've watched 4 games now, and it feels like the Tennessee linebackers are just okay. The Tennessee safeties are just okay. When you notice players on the Tennessee defense, it's either cornerback Jermod McCoy or it's one of the rush ends from Tennessee. That's really kind of where the strength is. The interior of the Tennessee defensive line is okay. The interior of the Ohio State offensive line is kind of okay. Really, I think the matchup of, I don't think anyone's going to completely dominate the interior of the offensive line one way or the other. I think that might be kind of a little bit of a stalemate, which is probably fine for Ohio State. On the outsides, I guess we're going to find out how much better Donovan Jackson is in terms of pass pro, compared to where he was when he played his first game against Abdul Carter. Because this is James Pierce and Joshua, I'm going to get it wrong again. Josephs, thank you. I always want to say Joshua Jacobs. Joshua Josephs and James Pierce are by far the best part of this Tennessee defense. And in the defensive line especially, that's going to be where, if Tennessee's going to make impact plays, it's going to be with those rush ends. So, and they will play those guys inside in obvious passing situations, kind of similar to the Ohio State rushman package. So you might end up, if you're in 3rd and 8, then you might get a James Pierce against the interior of their Ohio State offensive line. I don't know. That's probably not a 5 for me. If you have that kind of a matchup, so it's going to be important for them to stay out of obvious passing situation, 3rd and long kind of situations. It's an area where you could see Ohio State succeeding to a certain degree. I don't think there's any way I see the Ohio State offensive line dominating the game, but the Ohio State offensive line is just fine. I think a 5 is enough to win the game. If they play to a 5 out of 10, that's probably enough to win the game. Because I think this is an area where Tennessee has to win the game. Tennessee needs this to be a 3 out of 10 from the Ohio State perspective to probably win the game, because Ohio State has matchup advantages elsewhere. So if Ohio State can just play to a 5, I think they probably win the game. I am probably at a 5. You briefly talked me down to a 4 at one point. I could see it being a 6, but I think a 5 of 10 is probably realistic. And, that's certainly not a passing grade in school, but it might be a passing grade for the game.
Well, if it's pass fail, it's passing, right? Maybe. But flipping that on the other side with the Tennessee offensive tackles that we've seen this season with, and again, the names, John Campbell is the right tackle, and what
Yeah.
Lance Hurd is the left tackle, and random baseball names are also popping in my head with a lot of these guys, which is unfortunate.
Lance Berkman, that's who you're.
It's Berkman, and then of course Ken Caminetti at right tackle. But we've seen them both have issues in terms of just consistency. Now, Hurd, I didn't really notice him against Vanderbilt, which was the last game, but Vanderbilt's defense, I don't think we would compare it to Ohio State's defense. So I do think this is an area where Ohio State's defensive ends can make some noise against Tennessee's offensive tackles. But we say this is not the first time we've said that, and there are times where Ohio State's defensive pass rush, their edge rushers, are kind of quiet, and this is a game where I don't think they can be. You've got to get after Nico Iamaleava and change some things and make him hear you the rest of the game. Because when we saw Arkansas sack him 4 times, Tennessee didn't move the ball. Like they didn't score, they couldn't convert. And if you get after him, that kind of just blows everything else up. And then Dylan Sampson, the running back, can do whatever he does, I guess. But if your defensive ends can win that matchup, and I don't think this comes down to just the defensive ends against the offensive tackles, but that is an area where the tide can definitely be turned one way or the other for either team.
For sure. And, it's sort of cliche to say the game's going to be won and lost in the trenches, but the reason is because you can dominate and you can completely shut down a team's, opposing team's offense, or your offense can get shut down if you get dominated in the trenches. So, yeah, if you tell me which team gets more sacks, I would probably feel like that's a team that might have a decent chance of winning. Because, number one, you get the opposing offense off schedule, get them in predictable passing situations. All the stuff I said earlier about keeping Ohio State out of predictable passing situations because of the pass rush and the pass pro issues also apply to Tennessee. The biggest difference, I think, between the two teams is Iamaleava will try to do too much in the pocket. And sometimes that works great for them. And if you don't have good rush lane discipline and you get behind the quarterback and he has a lane open up, he can run and pick up a first down on 3rd and 9. That's a very common thing. We've seen him do that a bunch this year. However, if you can keep him bottled up in the pocket, he's going to hold it. We've watched 4 games. How many times has he thrown the ball away? 2? 1?
Maybe.
I can't really remember. It's just he is going to stand back there and he's going to try to make a play and
take a hit.
Sometimes that's a good play for Tennessee, and sometimes, oh boy, he makes some choices back there. So if you can be disciplined and you can get some pressure and you can keep him bottled up in the pocket, you can create some real bad decisions for Tennessee. But you got to be disciplined. We have seen Ohio State rush ends get too deep. We've seen lanes open up, scramble lanes, and that turn into big problems for big problems for the Ohio State defense with quarterbacks, even quarterbacks who are not particularly great runners like Dylan Raiola picking up a bunch of yards, Drew Eller picking up a bunch of yards. It's, it is something that Ohio State's going to have to be really disciplined and really stay on their jobs and not try to do too much.
Last thing I'll say about that is also when he does scramble, you can hit him. He will take shots. And that's the one thing a thing that we keep seeing repeatedly. He takes shots. So he's going to give you an opportunity to hit him like legally. And so if he does escape, then make him pay for it, I think is what the message would be to the defense without causing a 15-yard penalty or perhaps an ejection.
Yeah, I don't remember him sliding more than maybe once or twice. Like there's a lot of diving for first down, diving for more yards, diving for first downs, absorbing contact. It's not how you typically see quarterbacks run in the open field when you've got defenders bearing down on them. So, and we've seen fumbles come out like that. You can create turnovers there, whether he's running or he's throwing. So that's going to be for sure. It's going to be exciting, and it's going to be one of those things where everyone in the stadium is holding their breath if he takes off out of the pocket or is trying to take off out of the pocket, because something exciting and something big is about to happen, and no one knows which direction it's going to go. Next one from @DylanEveryday. compare Tennessee to one team Ohio State has already played this season. I think, to me, there's a lot of similarity with Penn State, where Penn State has talented defensive ends. The defensive line was pretty good overall. The secondary is fine, but not amazing. The run game, you have some talented running backs. The quarterback can make some plays with his legs. Iamaleava is a better runner than Drew Aller is. Iamaleava has a stronger throwing arm than Drew Aller does. Iamaleava probably makes more shaky decisions than Aller does, so it probably sort of washes out a little bit there. Tight end for Penn State, Tyler Warren, obviously substantially more involved in the offense than Miles Kitselman, the tight end for Tennessee. But overall, and you know, the decision making by the head coach, James Franklin, a lot of times will sort of trend a little conservatively, and every once in a while do something crazy. But generally, he's going to trend a little more conservatively. And it feels like Josh Heupel has kind of trended that way as well. And you're talking about two teams that are probably somewhat similar in terms of overall talent level, where these are not teams that are recruiting at the top 3 level, but they're pretty unquestionably two of the top 10-ish teams in the nation in terms of just overall talent on the roster. So I think, to me, the answer is probably Penn State.
I'll give you 2 answers that Ohio State fans aren't going to like. And I think there's some Oregon here in terms of the amount of RPO and that style of offense and getting your receivers out in space and trying to force the Ohio State secondary to make plays, make tackles. And we saw what happened against Oregon when Ohio State was just sitting at the sticks and waiting. And they're not going to do that with Tennessee. They've got to be more disciplined and more well-rounded than that. But I think that aspect, and also the odd fronts that Oregon runs, similar to some stuff that Tennessee does in terms of just like, you know, sometimes it's 3, sometimes it's 4, sometimes it's 5, which is also gets me over to some similarities to Michigan, which is some different kinds of fronts. But the thing that I would compare Tennessee and Michigan to is just the patience running the ball. They will just continue to pound and pound and pound, and they'll get more than the 3 yards that Michigan gets. And Dylan Sampson's very, very good. He's not Adrian Peterson. He's not flashy per se. He's just consistent. And that's kind of what Michigan's running game is, just consistent. And then boom, there's a 50-yarder. Boom, there's a 28-yarder, something like that. So I think Tennessee's patience running the ball reminds me of Michigan, and they do it in very different ways and different players, but just the commitment to the running game and the way they do it, like just hurry up and let's run it again. Hurry up and let's run it again, in the RPOs that come from that. So I think those are two of the teams, the different aspects of teams that I would throw that out there for.
Yeah, Dylan Sampson is probably better on just the average play at gaining yards than Khalil Mullings. Like you do have the same break one tackle and turn it into a 25, 30-yard run kind of aspect that Mullings has. But just on average, it feels like there's a lot of Khalil Mullings for 3 yards in the middle of the line, whereas it's Dylan Sampson for 4.5 yards into the middle of the line. And so that's, Ohio State is about to face a team who's wants to do something that the other team that they just lost to did, and also probably does it better. I'm sure is going to have Ohio State fans waking up in a cold sweat a bunch this week. But there's also, Tennessee's passing offense is better than Michigan's. The tight end isn't as good, but the passing offense is better. The quarterback is more dynamic, certainly, than Michigan has. The wide receivers are better than what Michigan has. I don't think the defensive line for Tennessee is quite what Michigan has. So there's, this is not Michigan plus. It's like, no, that's like Notre Dame's like Michigan plus. Tennessee, the best part of Michigan's team is the interior of the defensive line. And that's not, they have some talent on the interior of the defensive line. Jackson Moy and Omar Norman Lott and those guys, they're good, but they're not dominant in the way that like Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant were for Michigan. So, they don't present the same exact kind of matchup issues that Michigan did. But it's, it's not identical, but it sort of rhymes, kind of one of those deals.
Well, and I'm just using like portions of this is this, and this is kind of reminds me of that. Like I wouldn't disagree that Penn State as a whole might be the best approximation of Tennessee.
And that makes sense. I mean, these are two teams that are both in the college football playoff as teams that, Tennessee has probably a better win than Penn State does, but Penn State didn't lose to, what's the Big Ten version of Arkansas. Penn State played them and they didn't lose to them. So,
Illinois.
Illinois is ranked, so it's not quite the same thing, but yeah, it's similar-ish. So maybe Minnesota. Did Penn State play Minnesota this year? I think Minnesota might be the Big Ten answer to Arkansas. But all right, so there you go. So that's that one. Next one from @Vango_0. During the Michigan game, it seems inconceivable that Chip Kelly would fall into the play calling trap of trying to prove toughness by running the ball. It had to have been Day influencing the calls. Will Day stay out of the play calling versus Tennessee?
I love because I've seen this all over Twitter that this was Ryan Day's doing. There's such a clamor to blame Ryan Day for everything that anything that goes wrong is immediately his fault. And Tom, we have been talking all season long about Ryan Day saying that Chip Kelly is the much more patient running caller of run plays. And that's one of the things that he has commended Chip Kelly for, is that he's always said, like, he sticks to the run. He's more patient than I am. I usually, I'll try to get away from it and start throwing the ball. So the idea that this is now Ryan Day saying, we got to run the ball, run it, and changing the play calling aspects, because he's holding a play sheet. He's always holding a play sheet. Like he's involved all season long in what is going on, but it's Chip Kelly, and they have feedback and they talk throughout the course of a game. So, I don't know. I assume this came from somewhere in terms of this is Ryan Day's doing. And yeah, they want to prove their toughness and they want to run the ball and but like, I think they've learned their lesson on that, and everything that Ryan Day said after the Michigan game, like after stop, getting away from being defensive about the things that went wrong, and then talking with the team and then talking with the media. Yeah, we should have done this. We shouldn't have done this. This was wrong. We should have done this instead. It seems to me they have recognized the error of their ways, but I have not been told that was a Ryan Day doing, and we've been told the opposite from Ryan Day, not recently, but that Chip Kelly is the guy who really likes to run. And that's not new news. Chip Kelly has always been able to run the ball. His teams have always been able to run the ball because he sticks with it. He's creative with it. And generally it works. And it didn't work in this one because of one of the ways they were doing it. But I wouldn't put that on Day. And this is not me defending Day. This is just having spoken with and asked him questions about this, and having heard him talk about Chip Kelly's patience with running the ball. They were patient running that ball. And, patience doesn't always work though, Tom.
No, it doesn't always work. And I think there's some lessons to be learned from that game for sure, in terms of you have the best player on the field. His name is Jeremiah Smith, and you threw 0 passes to him. It even attempted to throw 0 passes to him over the last 20-something minutes of the game. Like, there are lessons that they're going to learn from that. A lot of what the game plan for this weekend is going to be dependent on the weather. I just checked right now. It looks like high of 27. Mm-hmm. The real feel high is 14 degrees. So that's the high. That's not kickoff time. That's 4 hours before kickoff time. And then the sun comes down and then it gets cooler. It is going to be brisk. And the wind is going to be, average of 13 miles an hour, but maximum wind gusts of 31. It's not going to be a great time to just be flinging it around like an air raid team. So some of that is going to depend on their ability to, adapt to the conditions and what they're going to do in terms of the offense there. But this is a team that I'm sure is going to learn from the mistakes that they made, and they absolutely made some mistakes against Michigan. Mm-hmm. And, I think the thing that should be most encouraging to Ohio State fans is, if you think that Ohio State lost to Michigan because Michigan is in Ryan Day's head, great news. They're not playing Michigan this week. They're playing a team that is, very much not Michigan this week. So they should, you should, if this is all was just Michigan is in Ryan Day's head, then great news. They're not playing Michigan. There's other stuff that can go wrong. We'll see how the offensive line holds up. We'll see how the conditions impact things, all of that stuff. But this is a team that has probably overall a skill advantage over Tennessee. If you want to look, however you want to measure that, if you want to just look at the blue chip ratio on the roster, Ohio State has a more talented team. Ohio State probably has more All-American caliber players on the team. I mean, there's just, it's not going to be an easy game for Ohio State, and there's lots of ways it could go wrong, but I don't think Ryan Day and Chip Kelly trying to fight the last battle in this one is going to be the reason it doesn't go well.
No, but I also do think if you can get past the defensive line, the guys behind them are okay, but they can be had in terms of the running game. And yeah, the conditions are going to be such that you're going to have to run the ball because I don't know that they're going to be able to throw the ball very well in these conditions based on what we've seen and I don't think these are good conditions for Ohio State. We keep talking about, Tennessee coming up here and the receivers being cold in 55-degree weather earlier in the season and needing a heater on the bench or whatever. Ohio State didn't operate very well in the same kind of conditions against Michigan, and it's going to be cold again. Maybe the wind will die down because of the night, and that's typically what happens. But if it's cold and it's windy, then this is going to be very, very difficult for Ohio State, I think, because I don't expect them to run well. And I'm not convinced that they're going to be able to throw well if they can't fix what the issues were in the last game. Now, I do think having a healthy Will Howard makes all of that better, and maybe makes it all good enough. But yeah, you're going to have to run the ball, and that's not about toughness. That's just about, hey, you should be able to run the ball. This is Ohio State, and you've got two very, very good running backs. You've recruited, you've got a quarterback that can run the ball. Like, you have the ingredients. And if you can't do it, Tennessee should get some of the credit, but Ohio State should also get some of that blame.
Yeah, that for sure. And there's plenty of spots where Tennessee's vulnerable as well. And Tennessee, if they can't run the ball particularly well, they're going to be in some trouble because Iamaleava has been, if he has a strong arm, he'll be able to cut through the wind. But this is for sure going to be the coldest game he's ever played in. And it's also going to be a game where, he's not a particularly consistent passer. We've seen a lot of overshooting receivers, throwing behind receivers, not like back shoulder, but just like throwing behind receivers. He's not the most consistent passer in the world yet either. He will, he's going to improve quite a bit as his college career goes on, but, he's not quite there yet. And he's going to be facing a hostile crowd, and that's going to kind of lean into our next question here from @OldPete1926. What is your sense for how much the team will be up for this game? Did the Michigan game break the team the way it broke its fans? If Ohio State loses to Tennessee, would Ryan Day still have a job if he wasn't owed $50 million? Now, let's work from the back. Ryan Day's not owed $50 million. It's more like $35 million, which is still a substantial amount of money, but not $50 million. So what's the sense for how up Ohio State is going to be for this game? I assume they're going to be very much up because you get through a certain point, you sort of work through the stages of grief. Like, yeah, they were genuinely in shock after that Michigan game. I mean, you could tell Ryan Day was just trying to figure out, like, what the hell just happened. But it's now been a number of weeks, and they have a path in front of them. This is not a go play in the Who Cares Bowl and 12 guys are opted out. This is, you are 4 wins from a national championship. You are the second highest, I think last time I looked, second highest betting odds to win the national championship. Like, the talent is still there. All the stuff that Ohio State had all season long in terms of talent, roster, coaching staff, all that kind of stuff is all right there. All they got to do is they win this game, and then you don't have to worry about conditions, because then you're going to go play in the Rose Bowl, and then you're going to go play in the Cotton Bowl, and then you're going to go play inside the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. So this is the only time you'd have to deal with bad conditions. So, it's all right there for you. You were 4 games from the national championship, and that's the equivalent of going into the Michigan game 2 years ago, where, okay, you have to beat Michigan, and then you have to win the Big Ten championship, and then you have to win the semifinal and the final. So, this is like 4 games seems like a lot, but it's, a couple of years ago, it would be like, well, yeah, sure, you're going into the last regular season game, and then you got to win your 3 postseason games, and boom, you're national champions. That feels like you're in the home stretch. And there are a lot of guys on this team who came back specifically to achieve goals they haven't hit yet. Haven't beat Michigan, can't fix that. Haven't won the Big Ten, can't fix that. Only other one left is win the national championship. And I can't, if guys are really like kind of like punched out at this point, then you'd see guys opting out. Like you could see that. That's a thing that could happen. You see guys going in the transfer portal. If guys were like ready to quit on the team, there's a way to quit on the team at this point, but they're not doing that. So all of that together, I don't think you can look at this and go, yeah, if Ohio State loses, it's because they just couldn't get motivated to play a team from a lesser conference like the SEC.
Well, if that is the case, then they didn't quit, they quiet quit basically,
Mm-hmm.
and just ran out the string. And if that happens, then that explains all of the other losses as well, in my opinion. Like if you can't get up for this and get ready for this, and I would say there is no way the team is as soft as the fans. Talking about the way the game broke the fans, that we saw the outrage, and we continue to see it, and people are ready to move on for sure. If that's the case with the team as well, then that explains everything else. I don't think that's what will happen. They may still lose and really, really want to win. Of course, we will talk to 4 offensive players and Ryan Day and Chip Kelly on Monday, and then 4 defensive players and Jim Knowles on Tuesday of this week, and get an idea of where they are. And of course, they're all going to say the right thing. So we're not going to run out of there and think, oh gosh, they're in trouble, because they're all sad. I saw one guy with a tear in his eye. They're going to say the right things, but again, we won't know until they come out and play like they believe they can. And if they don't, and you can tell like they're just not in it, and things get worse and the snowball just builds into this giant boulder, then that kind of explains everything else that led up to it, I would say. So I do think, would Ryan Day still have a job if he weren't owed so many millions? Yeah, they've lost 2 games. Losing in the playoffs is not a fireable offense the first time. I don't know when losing in the first round of the playoffs, or even in the second round, eventually becomes winning 8 or 9 games every year at Minnesota. Like they want more. Like it's the Glenn Mason thing, where it's just we want to go further, and so we're gonna have to cut you loose. I don't think that's the case in the first playoffs, and I don't know if maybe it's the second, depending on what happens with Michigan next year. But losing in the playoffs is not a fireable offense, not yet. So I would just say that as well. It would take more than one. And again, the thing is, like, how often should you expect to win a national title, especially now that it's going to be more difficult than it has ever been before? And to say, well, Urban Meyer did it, Jim Tressel did it. They didn't do it like this. And this is going to be a much different animal. Now, Ryan Day had his opportunities to do it like them, or to at least do it like Urban Meyer, and didn't get it done. That's fair. But this is going to be a whole different animal. And I mean, just think how Jim Tressel used to get his Big Ten championships. That was losing to Penn State and tying Penn State for Big Ten championship. There's none of that anymore. So this is a different world. So yeah, they can have those same goals, but I think to measure everything, we've basically seen 3 different stages of games between these 3 different coaches. But again, you can't keep losing in the playoffs, or else you're going to be fired, justifiably so, at least early in the playoffs. Like, I still wonder, is a Final Four banner going to be celebrated in college football like it was in college basketball? Probably not at Ohio State, because you should win it every year.
Yeah, I don't think that you're going to see Final Four banners hung in Ohio Stadium. They don't even have Big Ten championships up in Ohio Stadium. It's national champions. That's what's up in Ohio Stadium. And there aren't that many of them. There are 2 of them since in the last, 50 years. So, you can't really say that's the standard. Like, that's the standard to get up in the stadium, but that's not the standard for a successful season. Otherwise, they've failed in 48 of their last 50 seasons, which, I don't think you'd see the same level of interest in Columbus if 48 of the last 50 seasons were truly failures. That's not really probably a fair standard. There's a whole separate conversation that's really going on sport-wide around firing coaches right now. And right now, as of this moment, 0 SEC coaches have been fired, and I think only 1 Big Ten coach, Ryan Walters, has been fired. A lot of that has to do with Ryan Walters' sins went a little beyond. Didn't win in the college football playoff. Didn't beat an FCS team this year. So while his in-state counterpart made the college football playoff in their first season. So now everyone's trying to do why can't we have a Kurt Signetti? And so, there was a lot of stuff going against Ryan Walters for him to be the only coach in those two leagues that got fired this cycle. A lot of that has to do with the House settlement and the uncertainty around that, and how much money is really going to get, how much money is really going to go to that. And is there going to be are there going to be further complications down the line and all that kind of stuff? Everyone is just kind of keeping their powder dry right now and sort of hanging on for another year. I think that's probably going to factor into a decision as well, unless you have a booster that comes up and says, nope, I'm done. I'm going to, here is $35 million, sir. Would you like it as a big novelty check? Like, unless you get into that kind of situation, I think the sort of default answer for everyone is going to be, everyone's Fort-wide is going to be, let's hang on. Let's wait another season. Let's see how it goes. Does it mean it can't happen? No. Like Tony, Auburn is a thing that happens in college football. We have seen all sorts of coaching decisions and coaching changes happen. So you never say never in college football because Auburn is a thing. But I think generally sport-wide right now, the default answer is hang on, let's let the dust settle a little bit, and then we'll revisit it in a year.
Hey, we've won. We've got through the questions that we wanted to. We've got more coming. We're going to break these shows up because we've got a bunch to get through. You guys came through again as always, and we do appreciate that. And if you appreciate us, how about a thumbs up on the YouTube if you're watching, or a 5-star rating and review if you're listening to this. You can find us on YouTube at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell to be notified, all of that good stuff. Leave some comments. That always helps as well. And hey, tell us what you think. And if it's bad, I can just delete it. So only positive vibes. Come on, people. That's always appreciated. And of course, find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Sign up. First month is $4.99. Great time now to get this thing going with your membership. So check us out, see us there, and we will talk to you guys later.